Okay, so we're going to have a conversation now about well-being and in particular how that might affect prosecutors. A couple years ago, well, I don't know, 2018, I think, the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing released a report talking about some of the challenges that we see in the legal profession. We see increased rates of substance abuse, alcohol, drug addiction. We see increased rates of stress and anxiety. And when I say increased, I don't mean just like I'm more stressed than I used to be. I mean lawyers tend to be more stressed than other professionals and reflect higher rates within the profession of stress, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, things like that. And the question is how we deal with that in the profession. And we started at the law school teaching a module in the professional responsibility curriculum about well-being. And one of the things that became clear is that our students and our professionals in different parts of the legal profession are getting stressed out about different things. And so we started looking at what's going on with prosecutors, and Kevin Steele, the Montgomery County District Attorney, and I were having some conversations. We thought it would be nice to just sort of replicate that conversation here to talk about what's going on in, Kevin, in your office with well-being, what you're going to try to do about it, how you're thinking about addressing it, and see if that's useful to some of the other folks and their offices around the country. So let me sort of ask you with that lead in, when you think about what it means for well-being in your office, when that's a topic that you want to pursue, sort of how you think about that and how, let's make sure we're using the same words in the same way.
All right. So I should probably preface this with, we did and formed a peer council for our attorneys. And with it, we had to do a bunch of training to go and to be peer counselors. And I decided that I was going to go through the training myself to hopefully show everybody how important it was. And I preface this with that because you should all know if you do something like this, you'll figure out that you are probably the most damaged person in the room with things as you went through. And I said, oh boy, this is something, that I just thought I was kind of emotionally challenged, but they kind of go through a different aspect of it. But it's something that, we've had to think about, I think, more in our office, particularly in certain areas of prosecution. For example, the sex crimes unit, the child abuse unit, and the prosecutors that are seeing people at the worst moment of their lives, and they're going to the child advocacy interview with the forensic psychologist and working through those, and you get to see a lot. And I think, and we talked about it, I think the moment for me when I realized we need to start doing better, particularly in that realm, was when one of our great prosecutors who was head of the unit, the sex crimes unit, I found out that she would not let her children have male school teachers. And I said, all right, well, she's been at this a little too long. Put her in a different area. She's thriving and doing great. But for us, it seemed a little bit of, hey, we gotta concentrate on people being in certain arenas too long and how it can affect them. And we have a detective bureau too, and so we're thinking about that both from the detective standpoint as well as the prosecutor standpoint.
Yeah, and I think you've raised an area that I think is particular to criminal justice work, whether it's prosecutorial or defense work. When we talk to our students about what they're worried about from a sort of a thriving perspective, our students that are going to big law have they're not worried about their income, right? They're going to, New York pay scale takes care of people. But they're very concerned about a sense of meaning, right? Are they going to feel like what they're doing has meaning? Are they going to feel like they're just a cog in a wheel, like they're just an employee number, right? When we talk to our students who are going to go into prosecuting or into public defense, that's almost flipped. The stressors are pursuing that meaning. That's what's driving them in the first place, right? The worry becomes sort of financial and pay scale. But with that meaning comes a risk, and it's, I think, what you're talking about, which is you can pursue that passion so much that it can actually prevent you from stepping back, right? So do you have that kind of, I'm going to be a good soldier mentality from some of your folks, and are there things that you're doing to deal with that?
Yeah, and I think that's real, and that you get really good at doing something, and it's hard to kind of switch and go to another area because you feel for this and you want to see the cases through. We try to have whoever's meeting with that victim in the beginning, that's the prosecutor that sees the case through, so that they're not seeing a lot of different faces that goes in. And so I think that's a real aspect of this, but it's trying to identify that and using leadership to be able to have somebody to talk to or look to see, all right, is this time to start trying to rotate somebody out, and maybe we let them keep those cases as they move into a different unit and those kind of things, because that's important to them, and it is about the meaning. Like, I don't think there's too many prosecutors out there that signed up for this job because they were going to make a lot of money doing it. That's just not the
kind of a diligence failure, if so.
Yeah, there's that. So it's working through that and making sure that people are not losing sight of what they need to be involved with.
So talk about, we're kind of at a moment in time when I've talked to other DAs, we're at a moment in time where we're obviously kind of coming out of COVID. The court system is dealing with whatever backlogs and things have accumulated during that time. Throughout that time, you all had to manage cases in the new technology, sort of same as everybody else, and now we're coming back out. So we've got the not just prosecutorially, not just legally, but societally, the Great Resignation. We've got people wanting to redefine how they go about work. Like, what's the impact on that on your office and your folks?
Well, I think I can speak to this, locally with us in Montgomery County. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. I'm on the executive board of the National DAs Association. And spend some time with APA, with major councils, major city councils. And I think this is the topic that we're hearing, over and over. Like, what's your biggest challenge out there? Like, recruitment and retention. And I think there's a lot that has gone into that because we're in a little bit of a different world with this. The pressures that everybody had on them from COVID. And working through that, and then I think different opportunities that came up. I'm regularly supposed to feel flattered that I'm having the great attorneys that we've trained into excellent trial lawyers be stolen by private firms. And it's theft, firms.
Somebody should file charges.
The Attorney General's office, and one of my great colleagues in the Attorney General's office, I said to our new Attorney General, Michelle Henry, when is she coming to our Norristown office? And she asked why, and I said, well, I have a bunch of plaques for people that you've stolen. Maybe we can give it to them together. And the U.S. Attorney's office, who has also been in that realm. So we have people going in different areas, and and I think some of it has been, especially with the firms, the flexibility that they're being given in some of these opportunities with work from home. We do a little of it, but it's hard because we have a lot of cases, and we are working through them. Right now, I say we're in a really good place at this point, but it's been hard getting there. And now you have some challenges that have come from that. And I would say even some of the flexibility. I've one of our great prosecutors was stolen by the Department of Justice, and she's down in D.C. doing these national and international drug cases, and she gets to work from home for 3 days a week, and my mouth kind of dropped open at that because we're in court pretty much every day, and that's how this is gone. So we're losing a few.
It is interesting to hear that kind of different local and national perspective. We had Kenneth A, the Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division here yesterday, and one of the things that he said was that he models working from home 1 day a week for his team. You spending a day a week at home?
Yeah, lots of that. Actually, I was coming down here yesterday, and I wore jeans, and then I had to go to the office and spend the day there, unfortunately, because this is how our lives go. But that's just not a reality for us. It's we've gotten a little more flexible, and we do it when we can, particularly when somebody has something they have to write, a brief that's due or things like that. Oftentimes they're going to be able to get more work done at home. On that without a line of people and questions and getting pulled in different directions. So we try to accommodate, that where we can, but there's pressures that come with the job in terms of the needs. And, and a lot of that is police, and you can do most of that on the phone, but, we're approving warrants, we're taking them to judges, we're working those things through. So you got to be there. Is there any judges in the room here?
I can't promise that there's nobody online.
Okay. Well, sometimes not as accommodating to people's schedules because, kind of their world and we live in it. And so we need you up here now. Well, I'm trying a case in this courtroom. And so it's jumping to each of those things that we have to cover, and then part of the system.
So a lot of those things, let me ask you kind of a two-part question. A lot of those things seem like good people getting poached, judges who are inflexible with scheduling, right? Those things I would imagine somewhat came with the job pre-COVID.
You bet.
Are there things that you're seeing that are different than that because of COVID? Are they more pronounced for some reason now? Like what makes those be the things that are sort of first on your list?
Kind of what I'm seeing now and going forward is very positive with the folks that are coming out of law school and are signing up to be prosecutors. Very positive, and I'm excited and optimistic for where this is going. But there was a group that keep referring to COVID that came in, and I think we lost our entire class that was of that group, and I think it was a variety of different reasons. I had one young lady come in that I thought was going to be a superstar. I thought, that she's going to have my job, at some point, and she came to me and she had tears in her eyes and she just said, "I'm not built for this." And that was a surprise to me under the circumstances. But I think she looked at herself in the mirror, and I don't know whether it was. I can't surmise and don't know exactly why that this happened, but it seemed like that group was kind of a difficult one for us. So.
Well, I mean, I guess so one of the things that has sort of permeated the Great Resignation, and especially during COVID, but there's this conversation of burnout that seems to be continuing to be present in law in general and in prosecutors' offices specifically. And we had a conversation yesterday where we talked about I guess there was some data about the Philadelphia DA's office and the number of open positions they had and the ripple effects that has on prosecutors with caseloads and things. So maybe, talk about that. What's your open rate right now, and how does that flow through the office?
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of look at that too on who you're losing within the office. If you're losing somebody that's been there, for 3 months, that's not going to have a huge effect on your office, other than not having a body to put in a courtroom and covering things that way. But as you go up the scale, and one of the things that we've been able to do in our office that has really helped with retention is having more leadership positions within the office. And as you move up within the office and you lose some of those people, there's a big ripple effect of that, because you're losing people that are training, that are experienced, that you can give the hard stuff to, and then not have to micromanage, because they are as good as they are at that point. So I think that's been a little bit of the challenge that we've seen with losing people from some of those different levels. I think this year for us, as we work through the next bar exam, is going to be the biggest class that we've ever had, with new attorneys coming in, and that's going to change for us a little bit of where we have to prioritize. So our priority is going to be training these folks as they come in, because it's not going to happen as naturally as it would with having being able to pair people up with more experience, because we're going to have a lot of inexperienced prosecutors coming in.
So to that point, let me show a slide that goes back to COVID, but I think you'll see kind of the point I want to make about this. So this is not a lawyer-specific slide, but this is a slide about people going through COVID and sort of self-reporting how they feel like they've been affected by COVID, what their emotional state is sort of writ large coming out of COVID. And you can see at the bottom, this is 7 million assessments, 18,000 assessments rather. So first of all, we're less extroverted, right? People are less likely to be reaching out and building relationships. So you've got new lawyers coming in. What's the thing they need more than anything else?
To build relationships.
Thanks. Yeah, we didn't even rehearse that. Right? You need those relationships. Like I remember being a brand new lawyer and walking into, a fourth year's office and closing the door and being like, "Yo, Tom, what's a motion?" Right? And so we're less extroverted. And by the way, the skills that we've been using to do that, we've been doing it on Teams or Zoom or whatever. Right? We're less open. So again, that willingness to sort of show weakness or insecurity when you're doing something. We're less agreeable. Anybody want to just go out and walk on Walnut Street and listen to the cars? I think I don't get a lot of pushback on this point. But this is the one that I think is really important if you're a prosecutor or a public defender. We're less conscientious. In other words, we're less likely to dot the I's and cross the T's. We're less likely to make sure everything is really tucked in and set up. And if you're a young attorney and you're not asking for help as much, you're less comfortable doing so, you're more insecure in your position, and you're more likely to be like, on a detail, right? Talk about how that impacts your office.
Well, I mean, that goes back to, our focus, I think, looking forward in terms of training and being involved. And, the stupid questions are the ones you don't ask, and really that engagement and working through it, because that's going to be, a need. And look, people make mistakes, right? And that's part of learning. And so you hope that you can give those types of cases that where you're making a mistake, it's not that big a deal to the younger attorneys. The summary appeals that come up, and so it's a summary violation, and all right, that one didn't work out. Okay, well, did you learn a lesson from that, and how do you come? But when you have a lot of new people moving up quickly, one of the things that we have concerns with going forward is, some people are getting cases probably earlier than they should. And I think as everybody knows, with a, when a defense attorney makes a case and it's an error. When we make a mistake, it's called prosecutorial misconduct. And that's something that we have to make sure that we're holding everybody up to the highest levels that we can to work through that.
Well, and I think, you and I have had lots of conversations about the phrase prosecutorial misconduct, and we see eye to eye on that, right? I think that is a term that is used in courts have used that term to explain conduct, but sometimes it's, an improper, leading question on direct examination, right? And it's labeled prosecutorial misconduct. And so I think one of the things that we need to do as a system is to understand that the emotional hit on those words and the technical description of those words is often not the same thing. Not always, but often, and seeing it that way, and sort of the not the acceptance necessarily of mistakes, but the normalization of mistakes, and figuring out that not every mistake has to be punitive in its response. And I do think that the responsibility that comes with the job, is a big deal there, and figuring out how to balance that is important. So you used the word engagement, and I think engagement from a psychological perspective is really important, because psychologists think of engagement as the opposite of burnout. So I think I have a slide. Yeah, so this is burnout, right? Burnout is, I'm exhausted, I can't keep up, I'm not sure my work even matters, and I'm not doing it very well, right? So that exhaustion and cynicism and low efficacy. And when you and I have talked in the past, you've talked about, look, I got people that are running 1,000 miles an hour, and then I lose this person, and then I lose that person, and now I've got fewer people running 1,050 miles an hour, right? So is that something that you're still seeing? Something that, you say you've got this big class coming in, but now you're going to add a lot of training you're going to have to do.
You bet.
Right? So how does that impact the team?
Yeah, and look, I'm optimistic because we've worked through our homicide backlog. We've gotten our cases back to where we were, pre-pandemic, and so it's going to be more manageable going forward. And I know that we're very blessed in this, because I hear from a lot of different offices that they're not in the same place that we are right now. So I understand that's a blessing that we've had with everybody really working together to get through this. But you have to worry about anybody when they leave, especially when they have a big caseload. And if you don't have somebody to fill at that point, well, that caseload gets distributed to other people that are already managing a lot of cases. And so, so that's been a challenge, working through that. And I think that certainly has led to, some burnout and different things like that. So we've tried to, address that in a number of different ways, including, making people feel that they're appreciated for doing all this extra work. We just recently were able to get something through with our county commissioners called sustained vacancy pay. And the theory behind this was, I'm not going to spend my budget for personnel. And I don't have the people in the position, so we're not going to reach the budget on that. So I have less people doing more work. I need some of that money to be distributed to them, and at the 11th hour, as we went in, the public defender said, "Hey, can we get on board with this?" And I said, "Absolutely," and it helps make my argument for them, because they're in the same situation that we are. And I think it made it harder for the county commissioners to say no to it, and so we got that approved, and then that's been a big thing for our office, that it was, and it was back pay on it. So it's substantial in our world, where a check is coming for $6,000 that you didn't expect, and that's been helpful, I think, in some of the morale, but trying to do it in a lot of ways. I see on your slide cynicism, and that's part of the job, though. That comes with it, and we all have that. I tell our interns when they come in, I'm giving you a gift this summer. You live in this bucolic, wonderful area of Montgomery County, and you're going to get to see all the terrible things people do to each other. The gift of cynicism.
Well, so let's distinguish cynicism from gallows humor, just to be, just to be clear. But you actually hit on something that was a question from the audience, which is, a lot of the concerns that we're talking about are things that the public defender shares. And so are there other opportunities where you and the public defender are sort of linking up to deal with some of these wellness issues and engagement issues?
You bet. I think that's, that's one of the perceptions that's out there, that, it's adversary system, and so you're fighting all the time. Well, yes, in court when we're in trial, but there's a whole lot of other things that are going on, whether it's diversionary programs and all the things that we're working together. And we found, especially, in working with our staff issues and things like that we are very aligned on this. So, as the president of the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, I was out on our courthouse steps with a number of folks from the public defender's offices across the state asking for more funding for them, because in Pennsylvania we get a amount of money for the elected prosecutors within the state. There's no money that goes to the elected, or not the elected, the appointed public defenders in the state. So, fair is fair, and doing things because we are aligned. And look, for us, I would much rather have a really good defense attorney on the other side, because after the person's convicted, we're the ones that are working on the ineffective assistance of counsel case. So that's part of the job that goes with it. So yeah, we're real aligned at this point. We'll see how that is going forward here.
Yeah, you and I have done a lot of talks over the years, and you've given me a lot of quotes that I've reused. And one of them is, you really want a high quality prosecution, build a high quality public defense. Yeah. So yeah. I think that's a wise statement. So when we talk about combating burnout, right? Well, and let me say, to your cynicism point, right? Lawyers are kind of wired, and I, as a legal educator, right? We're helping you out here. You're welcome, right? Because when we do issue spotting exams, what we're training people to do is scan the horizon for any threat that might be out there that could affect the person in the scenario, and spool it out to its logical apocalyptic conclusion, and then resolve it through argument. Right, which is not something that necessarily lends itself to the optimism that you're displaying. So I don't know if it's been a while since you've been in the courtroom or something else.
Oh, I've been pretty often.
But I think the optimism is great. But I think that what we're looking for is the opposite of that, right? And you use the word engagement, and that's exactly the right word, because the engagement is that conscientiousness. It's that extra mile behavior. It's that enthusiasm for being here. My wife is the leader of a large law firm. And she created a chief engagement officer position, and I came home studying this stuff, and I was like, Jamie, vigor, dedication, and absorption. And she was like, babe, you got to give me something more to work with, right? You got to give me something snappier than vigor, dedication, and absorption. But science, right, is my answer. So this say, stay, and strive, I think, is a little snappier, right? The idea that your people, what you want is your people who are going to be, if they're at cocktail parties and somebody says, what's it like working for Kevin Steele? They're like, oh my God, that's the greatest place. I love the people. The work is so meaningful. We do things in the right way. They really care about getting it right. Like, everything's just so great.
That happens all the time.
I'm sure that it does. I'm sure that it does. No, I follow the office's Instagram, and I see those videos. But those people are more likely to stick around. And as you said, retention is both expensive and as a matter of the work, as a quality matter, it's a real challenge, because of course you're training some pretty specialized skills. And then the last part, the strive, is that that extra effort. And in the same way that you can tell when somebody's just mailing it in, you can tell when they've got that extra kind of pep in their step on this topic. And so, as a model, right, for thinking about this, what you and I have talked about is this jobs demands resources model, because of course what ends up happening is our work and our life are semi-permeable membranes, right? And I'm sure you're seeing this with your folks. With Jamie, when she became the chair, the thing that was surprising to me was how often she was dealing with, my son was just in a car crash, I have to leave. My father's just been diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma, I'm gonna need to take some time. My assistant's nephew has the following issue, right? And so the management challenge, talk about the management challenge of things, COVID falls in this category, right? Things that aren't your fault, but that doesn't mean they're not your problem.
Right. So at least in our office, and I think this is one of the things that you see in prosecutors' offices generally, a lot of who we have coming in, at least the local level, are going to be, coming out of law school. A lot of them, it's their first real job, and they get married, and then they have a child, and then they have another child, and everybody knows all the challenges that come with that, and that's life. There are not many days that there is not a child running around our office, and it's just one of the things, and I embrace it, and we have lots of other things, and people jump in to help look after a child because somebody's got work to do, and the child, has in-service day or something's going on, and they don't have childcare. At those points of time, somebody's sick, somebody's, doing these different things. We try not to bring real sick kids in, but, but that's an element of it, and that's life. As things go on, it's really breeding teamwork, and that starts as soon as somebody comes in the office, because you can't manage all the things that are out there in life and what the obligations of the job are. So you're going to need people to help you. We have a lot of autonomy that we give in our cases, which I think is very important for people that and I tell them, in a lot of this, you have the same power that I do, in the cases, and I'm not going to micromanage you, and you're going to handle your cases, in the way that you see fit and work them through. So, with that though, they have to put everything they can into them, and that's sometimes hard to manage with the craziness of life that goes on. But I think we're a lot more accepting of that than when I started in this 30 years ago. There wouldn't have been any children in the office at that point, for a variety of reasons. But
so the idea of the model here as a way of thinking about this, and I think you and I've talked about this, but I don't think you've seen this slide, and I know you haven't seen the next slide.
Okay, great.
So the idea is that there are demands that the job brings, right? And then there are demands that our lives bring. And then there are resources that the job brings, right? Your team, your willingness to be flexible, your, whatever else it might be. And there are resources that your personal life might bring. Some of those might be sort of personality driven, and others, well, Jamie, she's very fond of saying, when people ask her what her secret is, she said, a good husband is nice, good childcare is essential, right? So I know where I am.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm still your friend.
She's not wrong. So you've got these job demands and resources, and the model becomes pretty simple, but I think it's useful as a framework for how to have the conversations because, look, if demands are outweighing resources on a consistent basis and what seems like an unchangeable basis, then you're on the path to burnout. Yeah. If the resources outweigh the demands, then you're on that path to engagement. Each of those has impacts on performance. And the role of you and your leaders is to sort of identify what the demands and resources are. And the challenge, I think, to that is the resources are individual, the demands are individual, and they change all the time.
You bet.
Right? Mm-hmm. And when you talk to your team, do they give you all the insights from the management course that they took in law school?
Yeah. Yeah, still looking for that one, right? Yeah. Well, I think along those lines, I think what has been important in that regard, especially with the leadership team, is to, when you're doing your evaluation interviews and things like this, it's not just evaluating that, it's evaluating why they're staying, what they want to get out of the job, what challenges are they looking for, how do they want to advance and do that, and what are those little things that are really causing them a problem with doing the job the way they want to do it, and trying to identify them, and then deal with them. As a management team, like, is there things that we can do if we have one judge that is causing a bunch of problems because of something that they have going in their courtroom? Well, that's a conversation that I go and have with the judge, and say, you're causing me a problem with keeping people if you keep doing this, and they've been pretty receptive when I've had those conversations. So, it's trying to look at all of those things to not get to that burnout aspect of it, because it's not good for anybody.
So one of the questions that we have here, before we get to the next slide, I think we just hit this one, is talk about balancing senior prosecutorial flexibility and work from home to retain them versus having them be available to mentor new prosecutors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's real, and I think that goes back to a little bit of the factor of open doors. Everybody's got a line at their office with the young prosecutors coming in, and we encourage that. But there's times when our folks, because most of our leadership team is all in court, covering caseloads, doing the things that need to do, and they've got work that they've got to get done too. So there's those days where you close your door and put a sign on your door and say, don't bother me, or something along those lines, and or work from home to be able to do that. So it's a balance, and I think for some of the managers, that's been a huge challenge for them, because they know that they have to do this and help, and the pressure that comes on them to do the jobs that they need to do. Now, I will also say that sometimes the relief is going and doing a trial. Honest to God. Because,
thank God I finally have time to breathe.
Right, because I'm not dealing with anything else other than this trial. And that's what we get to do. And one of our folks this week, who is an incredible leader in our office, and she has our buds person position in the office, and is dealing with so many things. She is in a very an awful trial, a child sexual abuse trial. I have never seen her smile so much, when she comes up from court, and the different challenges and working through. But that's a little bit of it that you get to put it aside for.
Well, the facts sound obviously horrible and difficult, and yet again, that sense of meaning and sort of getting back to the purpose of why you came to the job maybe is hopefully something that is sustaining in some way and reinvigorating.
And I think for the leadership team, it's allowing people to do that. I do it, and at this point for me, it's a lot of the cases that just really piss me off, and a lot of the relationship-based homicides and those kind of cases. But I feel that way when I'm in court, and our first assistant can answer all those questions that would otherwise be coming my way.
So when we look at burnout, and I've been smiling as you've gone through these things, because I know you haven't seen these slides, but you've ticked off a lot of these in the way you're responding. So clearly, you're on the right track here. So an overwhelming workload, a lack of recognition, a lack of community, right? Feeling like you're isolated and you're out there. Feeling like, and we talked yesterday, there was a panel on procedural justice, and procedural justice is something that you can give to the community externally, but it's also something that you do inside, where people know why decisions are made. They feel like they have a voice. They feel like if, they may not agree with the results of every decision, but if they believe in the process, right, then they're more likely to go along and have that say part that this is a great organization, right? A disconnect with values and a lack of autonomy. So, of course, if we're doing engagement, right, we reverse all those, and this is where it's been really funny, because you're like, look, if you recognize people, right, we try to give them a lot of autonomy, and so. Talk about, the procedural justice aspects of what you do, because sometimes you're going to move somebody into a position where they don't want to be, or, there is sometimes a balance between what somebody wants to have happen and the requirements of the job, right? So how do you handle those conversations when somebody, my wife had somebody who said, if I'm going to work from home, you should pay my rent. I don't know if you've gotten that one, but there are going to be times where somebody wants an accommodation or wants the job to go in a particular way, and it doesn't. Like, how do you deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, and look, there are small things that I think we can do and accommodate, and we are able to have some flexibility, with them. But there's bigger aspects to the job. Like, these are the requirements that you have to do. These are the core functions. And if you can't do that, then you move on. As you put these slides up, the lack of community, and I wonder whether, that was kind of the issue with the class that we lost here because of lack of community. They did their internship, by Zoom. We had a trial competition by Zoom. They were put out in courts and not all together in kind of the fishbowl where everybody starts, and didn't have the same, community aspects that we do. We have a bike team. We have, fun events that we do in the office that they can't do at big law firms and things like that. But
you can't do trust falls on Zoom. I had a question in there, and then it left. So I'm going to go back to the audience question.
Okay.
You about to say something?
No, I probably should have dealt with the procedural justice aspect.
Since that was the question that I asked. Yeah, go ahead, take it away.
But
way to fill in my mental gap.
Yeah, well, I'm here for you, man. A little bit, and I think I'm very blessed with the people that I get to work with, because for the most part, when we've had different places in our office that have opened up or things that needed coverage, people have said, I'll go wherever you want me to. I would prefer this, but I'm willing to do that. And I think, to a person, people have said that, at least the ones that are with us. And I think, for us, and I'll throw diversion and things into that. The biggest growing area of our office over the last 7 years has been, the unit that covers pretrial services and diversion and the treatment courts and the work that's being done there. And I think that's also been, a place where we've gotten where, we're solving our homicide cases, our overdoses are going down, and our prison population is less than half a capacity. So we've been able to balance this in a way that's working for us. And I think that's been a part of it. And I think folks are more focused on that aspect of the job too. I don't see everybody coming in just saying, I'm going to lock people up. They're coming to the DA's office because they want to make a difference in people's lives, and they want to they want to do work that matters for victims, for the police, for the community, for the defendants. And that's the thing that has to go into each of the decisions that we make.
Well, and you brought my question back, so
Good,
so
I'm
thank
glad.
you. I think one of the questions is we talked about values disconnect being a pillar of burnout, and then the mission. And I guess my question would be, have you seen the kind of social justice, racial justice movement that has come post George Floyd, impact people's interest in being prosecutors, right? When police are having trouble hiring, prosecutors are having trouble hiring, how do you interact with the sort of social perception among law students that maybe being a prosecutor is not something that conforms with their values?
Yeah, and I think the thing that hit me the most was our friend Steve Chanison, who works at Villanova at one point, and he was a former federal prosecutor, and he said to me, Kevin, I used to try to talk people into becoming public defenders. Now I'm trying to talk them into becoming prosecutors because there's a perception out there. So, one of the things that we tried to do as the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association is go to the law schools. So we did law school forums at most of the law schools across Pennsylvania at this point, and it was interesting. In the first ones we did, we had a lot of the electeds, that were graduates of that school, and then we started moving away from it, and I think it's been really good because we get to work with these incredible young prosecutors that are so engaging and love their jobs, and putting them where they can talk to the students that are much closer to where they are. That's been an important aspect of it, and I think it's doing things to look at who's interested in public service. I did the thing at Villanova Law School, and we had lots of judges and public defenders and DAs from across the state, and then we had 15 students. 14 of them were women, one man. And I asked, I'm like, what's going on with this? More women are interested in public service than men are, at least from what they were seeing. So as an association, we formed a women's prosecution section of the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, because that you hope is going to be able to mentor and help folks coming in. We just approved doing a Black Prosecutors Association within the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, and hopefully that will encourage different things. And at least for our office, right now, we are more diverse than we have ever been. So, I hope that those trends are going to keep continuing. But I think it's trying to change the tone a little bit on what we actually do, because there are, I think, a lot of misperceptions out there on it. And I we're on a conversation the other day, and talking about exonerating people. I mean, we do a lot of that every single day because we are not moving forward on investigations and prosecutions, and that's on the front end. We're not talking about the tail end of things, and that's I think something that we need to talk about more because that's part of the job too. That we're reviewing the cases coming in, and we're not proceeding on a lot of them because it's not there.
One of my favorite awards or strategies in that regard was Devin Archer, when she was the prosecutor in Harris County in Houston, actually had an award for a prosecutor who had withdrawn a case that was in process because they got down the road and realized there wasn't enough there, and sort of that recognition for, hey, we don't have to push it through just because it's come this far in the process. Call it like you see it and pull it back out.
Yeah, so. and I and I will tell you that there are some of my colleagues, and I've been in these forums when they're asked what they're most proud of, and it's cases like that, that they realized it was wrong, and that takes courage. It takes courage to do, and you hope that the people that we're hiring and bringing up through this are the people that have the courage to do that.
So this question from the audience is one that I love these questions because this is not anything that I had even considered. But apparently, there's a court in Colombia that started hosting their hearings in the metaverse. So I'm envisioning.
I'm going to leave this question for you.
I'm envisioning like the Avengers at this hearing personally. But one question is sort of how will technology, how will AI, are you looking at or thinking about how those things are going to come in and help you do your job and help deal with some of the issues that we've been talking about?
So I guess I'll look at it a couple ways. I mean, my biggest frustration has been, the records management system, the data, the things that we really should have that don't have. But in terms of, an investigation aspect of it, the technology, and I'm going to be speaking to Chamber of Commerce this evening, on some of the things that we're using in this arena to help keep people safe. So I think there's a lot of great use of technology that's out there, and going forward, I don't know if I'm answering the question along those lines, but yeah, and I hope that we're going to be moving. I mean, this is the drum that I keep beating. That in listening to the last panel, I got a couple ideas on how to keep approaching it with the commissioners to try to get the funding we need to get be smart on what we need to be smart on.
Well, if I'm going to do my lawyer part, I'm going to be cynical too. So, one thing that worries me is ChatGPT comes out, and we at the Quattrone Center are kicking around on Teams, and 2 questions into ChatGPT, we've got a very serviceable search warrant for drug possession, right? That just says, hey, give me a search warrant that gives me probable cause for the possession of drugs, right? And you get somebody who's overtaxed, somebody who's in a new position. How do you make sure that the judgment is there and the conscientiousness is there with these tools to do things that aren't cutting those corners and could lead to a wrongful conviction?
Yeah. I mean, that's where I hope all the checks and balances in the system, come into it. We get to work with a great law enforcement community that is very conscientious, and that's that first level of it, right? They're working that investigation. In a lot of those cases, you have a prosecutor that's approving, a warrant first, and they're putting their name on it, and I know they never want to put something before a judge that is not going to be the right thing, because that's on them if their names are on it. And then you have the judge, of course, that they ask questions, and they tell us we have to go back and oh, well, we have this. Okay, well, then you go back and put it in and do that. So I think that's that the checks and balances, you hope that man those issues, and look, I know it isn't done all the time, and there's examples of it, but you hope that that we're jumping on that, and we have the people that are doing it right.
Yeah, and maybe the interplay with the last panel too, right? If you're generating the data, maybe you're going to be able to pick up on things that aren't happening and follow through, and that iterative quality improvement thing, I think, becomes really important as well. Because you didn't hear the line yesterday, but I think I've used it before. Without data, you're just another guy with an opinion. Mm-hmm. And so I agree with you that I think by and large that's how we want people to act, and it's how we believe most people are going to act. And then the question is, are they really living up to those obligations? Right. And I think they're more likely to, the reason this conversation in my mind is an important one is that if you're giving people these things, if they have the energy, if they feel like they're motivated in the job, if they feel like it's connected to their mission, if they have the autonomy but within reason, they're more likely to make sure that they're getting those small points right, and that has really big impact in the rest of the system.
Well, and John, I think too, it's trying to put those checks and balances in place, and I'll give John and the center credit for a position that we have in our office where we had a failure, and it was a lab report was read the wrong way, and so you came in with your team and looked at how we could get to the issue, and are there systems that we can put in place to be able to work with that and have an independent person that's not involved with the investigation look at the cases and do that, and we have that now.
And that very person is the person who's so excited to be on trial.
Correct.
Well, that's actually a terrific lead-in for the Sentinel Event Review panel we'll have this afternoon. So thanks for that plug.
Whatever I can do for you.
That was a fun project to work on, obviously. Anything else you want to say on the topic? Anything else on well-being that you're doing, that you're focused on, that you're worried about?
One of the things I'll say is having a group of really terrific people working with our younger ones has been, I think, one of the things that has gotten us through so much. I mean, John knows a number of our staff, but they're coming up with silly stuff, games that are getting played, a pizza eating contest, and that was really gross. I think dipping pizza in water and doing it was awful. But suppose you can eat it faster. And hot dog eating contest and games, and we have a bike team and trying to do the stuff outside, which I think helps build the community and the work together with it, and encouraging a little bit more of a balance in their lives. Okay, time to get out and get some exercise and doing that, thinking outside the box on it, and relying on the people that are closer to that end, I think is part of this. And I think we got away from it a little bit when we were all separated during COVID, except for those that went to the courthouse every day. And it was like Groundhog Day because you're with the same people. But that was something that I hope people can take away and think about doing, because that's part of it. Work hard, play hard type of atmosphere.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate your time. This has been helpful and educational. Please help me thank Kevin Steele.